We're going to start with your name and where we are and where you were born. So if you can just give me your name and where you were born and where you grew up.
Well, I was born November 27, 1911. And this current November, which has just passed, was the year that I am now 95 years old.
And your name, full name?
And my full name is, oh dear, well, I'm Lucy Rawlings Tootell, because number one, I was born Rawlings, and when I married Coach Tootell, I became Mrs. Tootell, and we and my husband did so many things together, I just can't quite tell you all of the things, but it did make me a very good golf player, for one thing, and also it made me a good tennis player, especially where we would have mixed doubles. And I'd be the only girl on those mixed doubles you'd have.
Where were you
and
born?
That's what I miss now, is because I just, you know, I mean, you just don't have that opportunity to do it or so.
Were you born in Richmond? Where were you born?
No, I was born in Jacksonville, Illinois. My father was brought up because the Rawlings family had settled in Illinois back. I can't today give you just the right date, I mean I'd have, but they came to North Carolina from England originally, going back prior to the Revolution, in fact, and they called themselves at that time as being Piedmont people going down there into because they traveled down the mountains of that section.
What brought your father from the Midwest to Rhode Island? Why did he come to Rhode Island, your father? And did he bring you and your brother as children, as babies?
We were both born here in Rhode Island on Route 1. We weren't born on 138, but I think we went down to Westerly or so. But I was the first child born, and they had only 2 children, which included my brother, right? And but the Rawlings family went out towards Illinois when they opened up the land for people to buy land. And it was found that Illinois offered more for your money than they did along the coast. And so that's how they came to go to Jacksonville. And one has to remember that at that period, the capital in Illinois was in Springfield, Illinois. It wasn't up in Chicago at that time. And so they, his mother, whose first name was Martha Seymour before she was married, and that crowd had all come over from England, and I don't know what my grandfather had been up to when he was over there, but I do know what he would say sometimes when the children were not quite behaving as he felt they should. And then he would laugh, and he would say, well, he said, if I had behaved myself in England, I'd have plenty of money. And I often wondered just what he did. However, I'm apt to study the background of all this because I have always enjoyed local history. And at that time, we had many people who had come somewhere from Great Britain. You have your Scotch people who came.
From Illinois to Rhode
Island. My mother and father were on the professional stage originally. And my mother graduated from classical high school, in fact. And then she went to the Academy of Dramatic Arts in New York City. And my dad was still out in Illinois, but he was interested in being I'll say this, a good politician. And out there in Illinois at that time, and that was true here in Rhode Island, the Republicans were pretty strong, I mean, there. And so that my grandmother and her friends out there had worked for women's suffrage. And they had, women had suffrage out there for several years before we ever thought about it. And yeah, and they had. So that was one reason that my dad came to New York City and decided he'd like to try going on the stage. And my mother was down there at the Academy, which I attended myself in later years for a while, but I didn't yet. And so both of them were preparing themselves to go on the professional stage. And that was the year, and I'm sorry I can't quite remember that year right now, but I mean, you can check, but the man who played in the play of Abraham Lincoln had created that part, and that was the time when in the United States they would have touring groups go all around the country. I mean, you'd have a group and they'd stay one night and then take the train someplace else. And this group covered all of the eastern side of the Mississippi River. So they had quite a trip. And also when I sometimes have a little fun, and later when my parents were married, they decided that they would like to get married, and their group had toured their whole tour for the season. And so for a while my parents stayed in Illinois there. And during that time was when my father's mother, the Martha Seymour, and the ladies decided it was time that they should be allowed to vote. And so they started trying to persuade their husbands and relatives and so forth that they should be allowed to vote, legitimately, but to vote. And when election day came, and that was when they were electing other people there, right? These ladies they weren't just cute-looking people who wore with their full coat. I mean, they had, maybe I shouldn't use this term, but they also had a great deal of guts. And, I mean, they weren't unkind, but they told their husbands that they must vote for them when this came up. And they said, if you do not vote for us, we will refuse to darn your socks for the next 6 months. And they were so angry that at that time, and I'm not unkind to the city of Peoria in Illinois, but evidently in Peoria, when the truck drivers and some of those that were pretty tired and they wanted to relax or something, they had a lot of, I'll call them hangouts, I'm not quite sure if that's the correct right there, but they said to their husbands, because they're right, we are going into those places and we're going to tell them that we want to be voted and become women voters. And so said some, because I guess it was quite a questionable place. And if you did go into those places at that time, they had much to say to you. I mean, I'm not saying there when I was there, but they did. And what did they take to be safe? Because many of them didn't even shoot themselves. Excuse me, I don't mean shoot themselves, as I've had, but they needed something that they could support themselves against these acts, because some of these people would really have spent quite a long time in that particular day in what they were doing. And so they took these hammers and rolling pins and the like. And they went up there, and there was quite a number who did go up, of ladies. And they marched right in. And what really happened was, because I'm quoting this because I was told, you know, with the story. Well, these, I'll say guys, if I may, these guys were so astonished to see these so-called ladies come in to where they were, and they were waving whatever they had, the rolling pins and so forth. They just stared at them. They were so surprised. And after that happened and they went back home, they were so astounded that those women would do that. They said to each other, well, if they can do what they've been doing today, we are willing to vote for them, because I'm sure that they will know what they want to do when the voting comes up, and right.
Yes.
Right.
When your father and your mother were married in Illinois,
Yeah.
and they came to Rhode Island, did they start a business up right away?
Hang on 1 second, Lucy. Because I hear people outside. Hold on.
I was
Hold that thought. I gotta do two things.
And do you want to drink water? Did you want water?
You're not taking the picture, yeah. Maybe I should have just a little, because the, right.
It's showing up.
You said the little
Your
green
glasses.
glass.
I'll be right with you.
Yeah, anyone's all right.
Okay.
I only poisoned myself. Yeah. George, excuse me a minute. This wouldn't be the woman that thinks she comes to clean on usually Thursdays, and might be Friday. I better. Right.
Did they want to come in to clean?
No, I don't want them to come in.
No, we don't. No.
But George, would you be kind enough to check on it?
She went out this. She already going out. Was 8 o'clock.
And
Was that the cleaning woman? Was that?
Yeah, she was running a vacuum cleaner. I could hear it.
Oh.
Yeah, I don't want her to come into all. They
She
get,
told her that.
yeah. But they, for some reason, they seem to follow what the men tell them.
I know. Oh, yes. See, we haven't come that far from suffragettes, have we? That must have
Well,
been
that's
quite
it.
a-
I don't know.
That must have had an impact on your
I'd love to be back in my own. Yeah, and then some say, "Oh, but if you should drop dead," and I says, "So what if I drop dead or the other?" And I had so on the other because I just can't. I can't be me. Do you know what I mean? It's not nationality, but you can't be me.
Is that fine with the?
And there was some, and I says, I'm trying hard to be dead, but the point is, right? It's you know, because I've been so very independent, you know, that you have, but this and yet they're not right in.
But the family wants to make sure you're safe.
Okay.
Yeah, but so what? I mean, yeah. I've been there. Thanks for the glass here.
You can leave it here.
No, I would have
Yeah,
right there. I will. Was that who it was?
Yeah, she spoke to her.
Well, thank you for speaking. Yes, because I knew that. And the point is, too, the person she evidently spoke to, I mean, was coming like on either a Thursday or a Friday for a week, and then all of a sudden one day, and she comes. I said, "What are you doing?" And so, well, she decided she liked to come right there.
Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter.
If you want to hold on to your glass then, or you want to put the glass back over there?
No, I'll put it because that won't show up on the picture, right?
We did to the refrigerators.
Or does that? I don't know. Well, if it does, does it? I'm sorry about that.
No, we can't see it. We can't see it.
Because you have, too much of my hot air.
We like your hot air. But we do want to talk more about Rhode Island. So
Yes,
get into
yeah.
that. And then
But I will say again, he bought that 1,000 acres from the Lillibridge family.
oh yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, all set.
In 1912, and that's why I have known with the Ninnegers, because you have your here. What is it? I get to.
But let's go back a little bit. Your
Yeah.
father and mother came to Rhode Island, and your father was able to buy 1,000 acres from the Lillibridge family.
He bought it at a distance in Illinois.
Really?
Because what he used to do, I mean, his family, you get into these different things, I mean, but you know, these groups out there then, and before 1912, because his father and mother it was either 7 or 8 children, and they were all boys at the time. And they had gone out, this is in Illinois, and it happens, I mean, they had been down in the north part of North Carolina, and maybe I shouldn't say this for you get, but his father owned a house for a while there in North Carolina, right against the borderline of North Carolina and Virginia. And when the revolution came along, this is the revolution, not Civil War, there, and that's where he came to know Nathaniel Greene, because Nathaniel Green came down there, and then at the time when he had Nathaniel Green had his the army moving up from North Carolina, and they wanted to get over the line into Virginia. But believe it or not, up there and along that north line, the only place the army could get through, and this is from North Carolina getting up into Virginia when they were wanting to get up there with the mountains and the thing there, was over the backyard of, what's his name? This is where I went for a while, I forget. The backyard of the Rawlings, or the Seymour family, because their farm was right up against the back there, and you had these mountains on here, and the only way they could really get through without being shot by the British, if they could get at them, right, was through there. And so Seymour said, and with General Greene, he was welcome. He could go. And when they came, I mean, it's a story, I can't tell you this, but and this is not made up either, because I mean, I had seen, and they came through, and they went through his backyard, because it's up there, and that's the only place, because you know that those who would go through with the mountains, and that crowd with the Seymours and a lot of the others down there that went finally into Illinois. They didn't go down the river or so, but they went over the wilderness pass. They had which they had, and one son was born in the corner of Tennessee after they were over on the other side for a while, and they went over. And so then when the British, I've forgotten his name at the moment, right? But when they followed the Nathaniel Green over into Virginia, and they got over there, they had a heck of a time there, and they had to turn, and that is when General Greene defeated that bunch when he came back over, because they came back through the backyard too. And it was, I mean, I've seen that in my life, you know, down and what they had and what they would do. And I mean, it was just amazing. But
well, let's move back to Rhode Island.
Yeah, okay.
And find out how you came to live in Richmond, Rhode Island. Your family.
Well, they were married, and at the moment I can't say what the date is, but I'm 95, and when my parents came east to Rhode Island, where they lived for the time, right, I was 2 years old. And they bought it in 1912, right? I can say that much. So on this, and of course they were down they were on the prairie land in Illinois, and also his parents raised racehorses, and he brought several horses with him east. He put them on a freight train. My mother carried me on with a train, and the train eventually arrived at Carolina, Rhode Island, that's right there, and they stopped there. And also the land, he bought the house that they lived in In fact, the original house was built there when they first bought it. And then in front, Amos Littlebridge had built a stronger house, and that's the house that was there right before it was on here. They had, and that is why. And then my father brought several horses back in the freight car, and he wanted to protect them, and because they weren't used to riding in freight cars. So he had the freight car, and he came with them there in the car, right? And he was going to sleep with them too, because because they had to go all the way there, and they had to come back to, I've forgotten now whether it was via New York City or not, and then to come up and to Carolina. You want to take care of emergency, George?
Okay, we'll just take a little break.
Yeah. Well, right. Well, I'll just.
Let's hold on just a second.
Okay.
To Rhode Island with the horses,
And they were in Carolina. They were getting off in Carolina.
and they were getting off the train in Carolina. And you can take it from there.
Well, at that time, the New York, New Haven, and Hartford would stop at Carolina with the big freight trains too, or anything. So the freight train was left off. My dad had a slight problem with some of the language spoken by Rhode Island and by Illinois. It wasn't bad, but it was different. When he arrived in Carolina, and I can't tell you where the animals were sitting while he went to some agent on the road and asked if it were possible for him to have a team and a wagon or something, so to take some of the equipment and so forth. And the agent there said, yes, he could take care of that for me. And he says, I can get you a horse and team. And my father said, I don't want a team, I only want a horse and a wagon. And the agent said, that's what I said. I'd get you a horse and team. Well, and my father says, well, out in Illinois, when you say a team, it means you want 2 horses. And I don't want 2 horses. And,
He brought the horses then to the farm in
well,
Richmond?
he didn't. He brought, yes, he brought at least 4 horses, because and also when he was plowing the field, like the golf course and all of that, he would use 2 horses. And he had another experience there, because my father plowed the whole darn course himself, right? But he used 2 horses to do it, and that was, Richmond. And also he had some of the people who lived here sitting on the stone wall watching him. And one of the gentlemen said to my father, he says, I only use 1 horse. Right? So my father was trying to be polite, and he says, well, he says, I wish that I could be walking too. But he says, before I get through this, it'll be around 50 square miles that I have to get done. And he says, it's too slow with 1 horse trying to do it, right? And So he had, right. But he early taught his baby daughter how to ride with surety on the top of the horse's back, and how the horse there would have a collar. They would have a very sturdy collar, because I would be maybe just about older. I wasn't walking yet. I was just a little kid. But he put me there with the collar, my hands positioned on those collars, and those horses would go by themselves down to drink from the brook. Yeah, they were down there, and right. But he'd also there, and he would instruct me that I was supposed to keep my hands holding, you know, you had, so you had.
So when your father came here with your mother, did he have the idea of building a golf course?
See, you're talking to that.
Right.
Yeah.
Did he have the idea of building the golf course right away, or was he going to just have a farm?
He was going to be for the farm, right. Yeah, right.
So at some point it became a golf course later on?
Well, part of it did.
Yeah.
It's what happened that, of course, the Lilbridge family also was with that, but they had. But you see, out in Illinois, they would think nothing of plowing up 50 square miles there. And also, everybody had to learn how to cling on to a horse one way or the other when you were going. And they had some beautiful horses, too. But, I mean, you learn out there.
Your father farmed, and then later they opened a golf course together. Did your mother work in the theater here in Rhode Island?
My mother and the father were both on the professional stage.
Here in Rhode Island, though, or that was before?
Well, they used to teach others to do so. Yeah. I mean, they didn't. Well, yes, she taught dramatics at URI for a number of years. Yeah, with all. But you had, I mean, all of this business was.
When did your father become involved in Rhode Island government politics? Did he
helping women first become voters? We did that. He had there because women were wanting to become voters. But at that time, whenever women had meetings, they were only allowed to meet in schoolhouses or churches, and this. And so you weren't allowed into like the public places, of course, if they were with their husbands or something, but they couldn't. So at the time after my dad had bought this 1,000 acres, the town of Richmond had their public school, because most of the smaller towns would at least have one school of public there, and that was down at Four Corners, that's right, and it was it's always, unless somebody wants to forget it, I mean, has been referred to as Quarrelsome Corners, because that had the big fight when and Janetta Brown was the school teacher for a long time, so she was one. And she had, and she would have, I went down there until for my first 4 years, so you'd walk down.
What was the name of the school he went to?
It was the Quarrelsome Corner School at Four Corners down there, and it still is, if you find with bicycle paths. Before I was going, but it's still with your old maps and everything you had. Almost every town would have a crossroads. Right. You'd have in the center.
So where exactly was Quarrelsome Corners? in Carolina?
It wasn't as far as, you have some roads or something down there now that are called Carolina, but they're not. I mean, they've been added to in later years. And that's, I've forgotten what the other, if you're taking the road from where the town hall is, it's a little different town hall. But you're taking, and I think that's 112 that goes down. And you go down 112 from the town hall till you come very shortly where there have been a few stores put up on your left side, right. And then on the right side, you see where there's a road. I don't know whether that's paved now or not, but that goes down and heads on. And so there, as you're coming down, it forms, say, a corner, and at one time, right on in that corner, and in late years, the school has been torn down, and for the main reason was, but it was on that area that my father and mother bought, so you had to do that. And it would be Janetta Brown, who was the Lillibridge, all right, right there. And you find with that, it was, I remember strange things, probably things the other, but she said, send Lucy down, she can walk down and there, and I think she'll enjoy it. So my mother did, and we were pretty dramatic at home, right? I mean, so we had quite a bit of that. So I went there, and I remember when I sat in the room, we would have maybe, say, 15 or 16 people or more there. And whenever it was time for a certain class to perform, why that group would go up and stand around the teacher's desk, or just at one side. I mean, or anyone who wanted to just go up and listen to the other. And I can remember I used to enjoy going up and listening. I learned a few things too, but to hear. And I remember one time that the house down the street, I can't tell you who's in it now, but there, had a new family coming into Richmond. I don't remember what the family did for a living, but there was the house. And there was a boy about 14 years old or so who came to the school because he was at the age where he was supposed to go to school, and he came. And you'd go in to the room, everyone sat at some table and desk and so forth. And then at the time of recess, shall we say, the teacher would ring a little bell, and the children they'd stand up and then walk out. They'd sort of fall into line, but they would do this and automatically go out there with the door, and that would be recess for a while. This particular day, this new family, which had come back to Richmond, had a boy, as I say, he must have been at least 14, might possibly, yeah. And he was sitting in the rear seat there. And everyone walked out and disappeared, except for this. Now it comes to me. He was called Manny. All right, And here is Manny still, sitting this. And so Janetta said, Manny, I think I wrote this or something. When I rang the bell, why didn't you stand and go out with the rest of the children? And he says, where I live down in New York City, we didn't get up to bells like that. We were used to getting up to electric bells. And at this time, you say it right. Well, he didn't know Yankees very well either, if I may be right. And she was there dignified. So she paused for just a moment. Then she looked at him. Not like this or so. She looked at him as though she'd make a good lawyer, And she says, well, Manny, she says, the next time, she didn't, no explanation, just that. The next time I ring this bell, if you don't furnish the electricity, oh no, if you don't rise, excuse me, if you don't rise, I'll furnish the electricity. Now the kid finally did, and of course I'm sitting here more because it was little, and I mean, it was, and I was taking that, and I thought, boy, what a job, because I knew very well she would furnish the electricity. I mean, there was no yes or no of any of that. And so he finally did rise and go out. I can't quite remember just how he looked, or he didn't. But I do know he never did it again.
Wonderful story.
And those are the wonderful things that you don't get now, and you know what I'm trying to say?
Let's talk a little bit to get up to the railroad and the Wood River Branch Railroad. Tell me about when your father decided to put a granary in Hope Valley, and why he decided to put it in Hope Valley and not somewhere else. You know?
Because at the time that he did, where it was finally built, was number one, he made all, once in a while, emergency or something, he made all his different mixtures. And they were really top mixtures, because where he came from in Illinois, and where they made you right there. So that was one reason he was down there, including the reason that he ordered his own grain from Illinois. So he would have big freight cars of grain, bran and corn and all of this come there. And he wanted to be able to park that freight train in a place where his mill would be, which turned out to be there in Hope Valley. And also in that, he had it built so it was tall, like the mills that you see in Illinois they have. And he there. And so he loved that. He had special, and also he was doing this for many. At that time, they had many polo games coming to Narragansett and around the state, and they'd have real top horses. And also we had then a lot of horse races. Almost every town had some track, regardless, almost every town, and they'd have at least one beautiful horse that they loved, and you'd have all of that. And they'd want to pamper their horses, right. So he eventually, of course, had some trucks to deliver some of these things. But it was top quality, and there, and so that was, at one time they were planning to extend the railroad up to Wyoming, but then they changed their mind, you know, finally with that. Right?
You know why they changed their mind?
Expense, and also they talked about when the station was finally right, because you'd have, I mean, at that time it cost money for like good horses, good engines, good cars. Now we'd think it was cheap probably, but I mean then it was. And you had that with the quality. And that was one reason why it's when our women finally were allowed to vote. And have I told you this before? Probably, yeah. But the fact that they asked my mother if she'd vote, and she said, you know, she was flattered that they did. But she says, I don't think Richmond's ready for women yet, which could be, but right. But these things start slowly, and it takes a long time. When you see what women have had to do, even in my memory, I mean, and going back.
When did you get involved with the railroad? How did you become involved with the railroad?
Well, of course, I went to high school, 2 different high schools, but that's it. I mean, I went 3 years to South Kingstown High School, and 1 year to Westerly. And Westerly was still right down there, right in the main part of the city. But, well, because the whole family was educated at something. I mean, my mother graduated from classical high school, and so she was pretty good at languages. I mean, she could speak German, Italian, English, and all of that, what you had. And we're there. And also they, and that's what, like Brahman University had a lot on intellectual things, you know, for the years. There many who came there too. And many of these people who came over by ocean, it wasn't too easy to get into Providence. So sometimes you're sitting on something up there and you're just over water and you don't know it unless you have the knowledge, right? But there, and then.
When your father was in the Rhode Island legislature, did he take the train to Providence?
No, he drove.
He would drive.
Well, there were times in bad weather or something where you might.
But he didn't take the Wood River. I mean, he didn't take the train to.
Well, he would if he needed to or wanted to. He'd take the train down if it happened to go when you had to catch the other train, you know, there. But he would go up into to Boston quite often because with the stock market and all that you had.
Did you ride the train often?
Well, I'd ride it if it was right, but there, I mean, it was.
Well, tell me about this picture. This is Lucy Rawlings. I
Well,
think you
that's
got
when I
married-
was, yeah. I'm sitting on the car that the executive car, you don't see much here, but if you want to go down, this was at Wood River Junction. This was at Wood River Junction. And I turned around. What you don't see, I'm sitting on here and had come down, which is what I call the executive car, and you could there. And this is one of the big trains, the ones that were heading for New York. And then many times the engineers, it would be where they could stick the heads off the sides and so forth and on, right. So it's just on here.
This is a picture of the executive train, I think. Is that the executive train?
Excuse me.
Is that the car?
Well, this is one, this is my cousin Reed Schofield, but that's sort of work. I mean, their first train. And this one, they have their, it's probably, I can't tell, they have the hats on and they're right, but it would be the result of an executive meeting where both those from the New Haven and those, because the New Haven and Hartford also had over time some interest in what was good for us really was the fact that these people on New Haven and Hartford, they liked the area around all this area. When they retired, many would be up here, Westerly or Watch Hill and the like and over, and that made it nice.
You said this is your cousin, Reed Schofield?
That
Cousin?
yes, he was the son of some of the Rawlingses out there, and he came here and also went to school. They were all, I mean, they were all pretty tall, Eliza. I mean, right, and out there, and they had. But that's who it was, because he's out filling up something there, but I can't tell you what it is.
What was your job with the railroad?
Well, I was vice president, so I had to be also one of the executives. I was teaching junior high school at that time, or most of the time here, and the one that's in Richmond now there at the town hall was first built, but they had right, and so that
I know the railroad has lots of purposes, and one, of course, was to bring the grain up to your father's granary.
Well,
Other reasons?
it was to be passenger at first.
Yes, tell me about the
Yeah,
importance for passengers.
And then also, well, passengers, it was, I've forgotten what they charged the time, but you could go, what they would do with the passenger is they would know some special train was coming through on the main there. And so they would arrange so that they would manage to be down there at the time. Of course, being a smaller area there, and also it took a lot of different freight, because you had many mills that were still running, you see, and then you had where they had it there, and also for a while, I can't tell you just the exact date, but then they cut a lot of wood, because they used it for the rails at that time for a while, and you'd have to have it, and they sent a lot of that wood out on freight and be picked up down there, and they had, and you would have, and then sometimes they'd send things like meat, because they would shoot deer and other cattle and the sheep, and And then they sent out wool there for the, but they keep changing what they made in the mills, so it depends what they were taking. But there were a lot of the mills. Not quite as many in Illinois. I mean, they were more on. I mean, they did have, but they would, and for whatever reason, it was probably convenience. But I always noticed it, especially through the Hope Valley and even down into Westerly in that area there. The people who went to college, especially the men, the people who went through high school down through that section. And I mean, now you have many that go up sometimes into Massachusetts and this. But those who were there then and going to the different mills and when they go to college, most of them went down to the south rather than up to Harvard. They'd go to, right now I've forgotten, what's the college in
Yale?
Yale, yes, thank you. I mean, but there were many of those people, Hope Valley and Shannock and all of those, you'd find that they liked to go to Yale. And for some reason, there were some courses that they offered. And then many of those who came over from Great England